It's been nice this year to have the eve of the new year, at least according to our calendar, be a Sunday so that we can join and practice together at this time that often reminds us of time. This point of the year, of course, is entirely constructed. It's imaginary. We human beings decided that this was the beginning and end of a certain period of time. It could have been put at any other time, and even the length of the year is somewhat arbitrary. If our journey around the sun were just a little bit different, then the length of the year would be different as well. But here we are, and we can make use of the awareness of a change in a year that we practice. We can be aware of that as a reminder of the importance of time. Maybe some of you have been interested in time in the past. Have any of you ever looked up the definition of time? I guess not. A little bit. No one really seems to have a good one. Doesn't seem to be a clear definition of what time is. The most common definition is simply that which clocks measure. What clocks measure is time, and that's what it seems to be. We're not really sure how it works, what it is, if it is. From an intellectual standpoint. From the standpoint of thinking about it, considering it from afar, we're not really sure what it is. But the times when we know most clearly what it is are those times when we're not looking at things from an intellectual perspective at all, but when we're aware of the precious nature of each moment, of each experience, of this moment, and in particular when we're aware of loss. When we're aware of having lost something very precious to us. At those times, at those moments, in those circumstances, we see how precious this moment is. I last year spent quite a while in solitary retreat. And I wrote a lot of poems, and when I came back, I read many of those poems. One of the poems I read is about the world. It's about this world that we live in, this human world. And the poem is very simple, but quite, harsh regarding this human world. And the poem is simply this: the whole world completely misses the point. That's the poem. So it's a 3-line poem. The whole world completely misses the point. And I think it's true. I was talking with someone recently about her experience losing a family member, one of her closest family members, one of the people who had been close to her from when she was a baby, had just died, had just passed away. And she was talking about her experience with that, and said that she was walking down the street, down Church Street, and looked around, and it was as if nothing made sense. And the point that she brought up that was so interesting to me that I want to repeat it now, that she saw someone getting coffee. She saw a man getting coffee. And it just didn't make sense at a moment like that, why, even if this person was really getting coffee, given the way things really are. The story of the Buddha includes a magnificent story about this. Some of you may have read the Buddha Charita. I don't know if any of you had a chance to read that, but it's the deeds or the acts of the Buddha. And before he left home to strive for enlightenment, He was a prince who lived in absolute luxury. And you can imagine that a prince back then lived in total, complete luxury. And yet probably didn't live in as much luxury as the average American does today. He didn't have the ability to turn a knob and have a hot waterfall descend upon him whenever he wanted. Didn't have the ability to eat foods from all around the world year-round. He didn't have the ability to take a pill and cure an infection. So while it's important for us to know that, as far as the story goes, he lived in abject luxury, nonetheless, we live in even more abject luxury in general. And so because he lived in such luxury, he was somewhat disconnected from the reality of things, from the reality of time, of the precious nature of time, because if everything's always pleasant, then nothing really matters. And he didn't know. He got to the point when he didn't even know. No one even talked to him about the fact that we die. He didn't understand that people die. He didn't understand that time is passing and time leads us without fail directly to death. No matter what happens, time will pass and it will take us directly to our own demise. He didn't know that. And you might think, well, that's absurd. It's absurd to think that someone could grow up all the way to the age of 28 and still not know that people die. But I'd suggest that even more than he did, even more than it could have been true for him, most modern people don't know that we die. You can see it in our eyes. You can look at people, you talk about death, and you look into people's eyes and you can tell we don't understand that people die, that we all die. It's something that's distant for us and far away. My mother has run the refugee program here, and I've learned that for many of the refugee families, when a person in the family dies, the next week is given to weeping. You don't work, you don't eat, you may not sleep. It's just about grieving. But for us, they could consider how we do it. Someone very close to us passes away, and maybe we don't go to work the next day, depending on how important the meetings are. Maybe if it's an important meeting, we go anyway. There's a sense of doing and doing and doing, no sense of the significance of time passing and leading to the end of doing. There's a disconnect there. And he, like us, he experienced that disconnect, the lack of awareness that we die, the lack of awareness that time is passing, the lack of awareness that the future is uncertain. And so he enjoyed himself for years, as we do. He had a good time with sensual pleasures, and he was very busy, like us. That's usually what happens. For people who don't understand that time is precious are typically very busy, which I'll get to in a moment. Until one day he learned that we die. And upon learning that we die, he looked around with new eyes and he saw everybody involved in their affairs, their projects. Of course, sensual pleasures, making sure that they got the things they wanted and hurt the people they didn't like and such, all the things that we human beings tend to do. He looked at all of it and he thought in the way that Buddhaghosa, no, it wasn't Buddhaghosa, it was Ashvaghosha. The way Ashvaghosha, who wrote the Buddha Charita, he puts these words into the Bodhisattva's mouth, the Buddha-to-be's mouth. He says, in wonder at the people, he says, "You are all so courageous. I'm amazed at how courageous you could be, because with death leaning over you, ready to strike, you nonetheless go merrily along your meaningless way. It's incredible. I'm not as courageous as you. I'm weak, sadly. And so I, unlike you, am going to throw away all of my meaningless affairs that I personally don't believe in, the things that I know are irrelevant to my true life, and go do something that really matters to me. Because unlike you, I don't have the courage to believe in tomorrow. It's a beautiful way of expressing the simultaneous deep wisdom and humility that he experienced at that time. So, we often are in that position. We feel courageous because we set aside the significance of death, and in so doing set aside the significance of life, because we've set aside the significance of time. Because we don't understand how important time is, how important this moment is, how important change is, how important impermanence is, how important unpredictability is. Because of that lack of understanding, we need something to keep us going. And in general, what we use is busyness, is rushing, is trying to do a lot of things. We want to do a lot of different things. We want a lot of different things to happen. And we want to fill up our lives with as many things as possible, because that's as close as we can get. We yearn for the clarity and the drive, the determination, the urgency that comes from understanding the precious nature of time. We want that urgency. We don't get it. And so we try this and that. You know, if you watch, my father wanted to watch a movie. He wanted all the family to come to a movie with him for Christmas. And so I went to this movie. And I noticed in the movie, maybe some of you have watched movies, generally the thing that's exciting about a movie is that there's a lack of time, that something has to happen in a certain amount of time. So in this movie, something was going to get blown up and everyone was going to die. And so you had to finish getting something done quickly. And everything revolved around that simple point. There's just a lack of time because the bad people are doing this and the good people have to do that. And everybody has to go quickly. We yearn for that sense of urgency, that sense of excitement. We want our lives to be like that. That's why we go to movies, so that our lives can get we can inject a little bit of urgency into our flaccid lives. So we pump ourselves up with things like movies and arguments with other people and things. But a big way that we try to make our lives a bit more exciting is by filling them with all kinds of activities. Because there's this sense that if I'm busy, then I must be doing things. There's a sense that I must be achieving something because I'm so busy. I just talked to someone who is a business person, and I asked him, as we do in life, how are you doing? And he said, busy. And I just couldn't help but, at the moment, I don't know why, I just couldn't help but in the moment say that everyone is equally busy. Everyone is exactly as busy as everyone else. No one has more to do than anyone else. Everyone is doing one thing right now. No one is doing more than one thing right now, and no one is doing less than one thing right now. We're all doing one thing. And we will continue to do one thing until we do nothing. Those are the only two possibilities for us. No matter how busy you think you are, all you're really saying is, I'm thinking about stuff that I'll be doing. That's what busyness is. It just means we're worried about getting stuff done that we're not getting done right now. But no one is more busy. We're all just doing one thing. If we say we're doing a lot of different things, and that's because we're thinking about a lot of different things, and that's the one thing we're doing. So when we fill our lives with lots of things, when we fill ourselves up with busyness, with rushing, then there's a sense of urgency which can feel a bit satisfying, but it's not as satisfying as the true urgency of knowing what needs to be done before we die. And what needs to be done before we die is that we come to be able to live our own truest life, to live our vow, to fulfill our purpose, to profess our calling. That's our job. That's what we most want to do. In order to do that, it's important that we have the experience of non-doing. Non-doing is essential. I myself have often felt very busy in my life. I felt I have a lot to do, more to do than I can do, and so I have to rush. And at one point when I was going through it, my father talked about his career, his work career, and said that one of the most important things for him in getting a lot done was learning all of the things that didn't need to be done. Gradually realizing that, as he put it, about 2/3 of what he was doing just didn't need to be done. If he didn't do it, it was okay. And it's hard to learn. You don't know which things are those things, and so you have to try, but you can learn that. For a lot of us, in order to get to the point when we can make the best use of time, we have to be sure that we're not doing everything that we shouldn't be doing. As Peace Pilgrim said, there are only 3 things that can hurt you or help you. There are 3 things in life that can hurt you or help you, and nothing else can hurt you or help you. Nothing else has really any impact on you. But there are 3 things that do. Your actions, your reactions, and your inactions. So if what you're doing, what you're not doing, and how you respond to what others do. Of course, if you want, you could drop that down to just actions and inactions and call reactions a kind of action, but I think it's nice the way she puts it. So for us, we often are worried about what's happening around us, but it's a great relief to see that what I'm doing right now, that is it. What I'm doing right now, I'm doing one thing right now, never more, so I'm never more or less busy than I ever have been or ever will be, or anyone else ever has been or ever will be. I am doing one thing right now, and that one thing right now matters. That one thing right now has consequences. That one thing right now makes a difference. There's an impact of it, and as we see that, then we can come to see that our purpose can be fulfilled. This point I know is very hard to believe. We hear our purpose can be fulfilled, but we hear that from all sorts of directions, and it's hard to believe that it could really be true, that we really could do that. But that faith, the faith that that's possible, is spirituality. That's what spirituality is. Spirituality, as far as I'm concerned, is faith that there's something beyond human understanding. There's something beyond human understanding. As Peace Pilgrim said, what is God? If you take everything that we don't understand and put it together, that's God. Everything we don't know, that's God. So we have faith that there's something that we don't know, that there's something that we don't understand, there's something beyond the human mind. And that's very good, of course. But if we want to take it to the limit, then there's one point, there's one area that has to be included. Because of course we can talk about some abstract reality out there that's beyond human understanding that maybe nobody understands, or only understands a little bit, but not really. And we can get all involved in that. Something out there, some truth out there somewhere about something. Until we see that in the final analysis, in the final aspect of a spiritual path, the thing that we have faith in, that we do not understand, is our own life. What should I do with my life? That is not understood by us. To get to the point when you have faith that my truest life is something that I do not and will not understand. I will live a life that I can't justify, that I can't understand, comprehend, control. This is the kind of faith that I'm talking about. Now, of course, we can say somehow the reason that the planets revolve around the sun and make a year, I'm not sure about that. I don't know why. So that's faith. And it's a kind of faith. It's true. But it's not the same kind of faith as realizing what I'm going to do today is beyond my understanding. This is a new kind of faith. And with that faith, we can take steps beyond our human views into a life that is filled with wonder, is filled with urgency, and in fact is filled with compassion, because we're no longer just trying to replicate in our actions the way we think the world should be. We're no longer just trying to get the world to be the way we think it should be. This is often what we call compassion, but a spiritual life is not about that. A spiritual life is one in which in this moment we're completely aware. In this moment right now, in this moment we're aware that what I'm thinking matters. It matters. What I'm speaking, what I'm communicating matters. What I'm doing, my behavior matters. And in this outward-facing direction, each thing that I do matters. What I think, what I communicate, what I enact, each of those things matters. Each of those three areas matters. That's in terms of our behavior. And we get to the point when we realize I can't understand any of it, because even the act of trying to understand it, that's an action. That's still something that I'm doing that matters. And from what perspective would I know whether thinking about this, whether understanding it is a good idea? Are you following this? This is sort of hard to follow, I know. Because we're so commonly thinking, well, I should just think about it. But that's an assumption. We didn't prove that ever. We have to go back prior to thinking, prior to knowing, prior to understanding, prior to comprehending. In fact, prior to existing, in order to have a standpoint, a quote, standpoint, which is simply no standpoint, from which to look at these things, which is to say not look at these things. Which brings us to the other side. The other side is that part of what we're doing is coming to the point where our behavior is beyond understanding, and part of what we're doing is coming to the point when our perception is beyond understanding. When what we see and hear and feel, we can't understand any of it, because we're always in this moment. We're looking at that chair right now. The moment we understand that it's a chair, we're in the next moment. We've added on the concept chair to the direct experience. Or if we have the concept chair, then we have the direct experience of a concept chair. But we know it's a concept chair. We don't think that that actually is a chair. We know that in the next moment we've added on a concept chair. And we have the direct experience of the concept chair. And that way we're in each moment having the direct experience of seeing, of hearing, of feeling, the direct experience of thinking in terms of our intentional activity, in terms of communicating somehow, in terms of doing. Each of those points is fully experienced in this moment. And when we're fully experiencing in this moment, then we can truly see that everything is constantly passing. Everything is gone before we've understood it. By the time we've understood it, it's not there. There isn't a way to grasp onto things in order to acquire an understanding of them. And from that point of view, from the point of view of everything passing, part of us is always in the state of looking at people getting coffee and not understanding how, why, or even if they're actually doing that. It doesn't seem real. It seems artificial, constructed. And in maintaining that awareness, we can become free from that illusion. From freedom from that illusion, our natural life, our true life is simply our natural life. It's the life that emerges without us needing to choreograph it, without us needing to produce it, fabricate it, construct it, maintain it, sustain it, protect it, possess it, identify with it. None of that's needed anymore because it blossoms forth naturally in each moment, because everything that is obstructing it has passed away in the last moment. That level of presence, of clarity, comes naturally from an appropriate degree of urgency. And from my perspective, there's nothing more important than urgency in this path. There has to be a sense of true urgency which could be translated also as horror, terror, in the awareness that it is possible. It's truly possible. It's really possible that I will come to the end of my life without having ever said a single true word, without having ever lived. It's possible. We realize that that's possible, and in fact, it's common. It's normal. It's the most normal thing. There's nothing more common than a human being who's born, lives, and dies without having ever expressed themselves. It's the norm. And so we have a sense of terror. And we look around and think, it's amazing that you're all so courageous, that you could throw away day after day in faith, that somehow magically you're going to awaken. I can't just have faith that somehow I'm going to awaken in this lifetime. I can't just believe that. I have to make sure that happens. I have to sacrifice everything. I have to risk everything for that, because that's the least risky thing to do, to be sure that it happens this year, for example. That we utterly commit to be sure that no matter what else happens, that awakening, I will realize to the point that I can live the truth this year. Now, naturally, this year actually isn't good enough, is it? If you're truly experiencing urgency, then it would have to be done this month, wouldn't it? Well, if you're really urgent, then this month isn't good enough. It has to be done this day. If you're really urgent, then this day isn't good enough. It has to be this breath. Before I inhale again, I must awaken. Otherwise, there's just no hope for me. There's no chance. There's no way to have confidence. There's that level of constant urgency, and when we have that level of constant urgency, then finally time starts to make sense. So I'd like to repeat a point that Shinzen has often made, and it's a point that was very helpful for me. He said that for most people, time is the enemy. Time is the basic problem, because time is what's bringing you to your own death. Time is what's bringing all the things you don't want to you. And time is what's going to take away all the things that you like that you currently have. That time is the enemy. Time is the source of insecurity, which is why most people are so averse to change. There's a real fear around it. We like it when it appears to us as if time is not passing. We like that. And then things like birthdays. As we get older, people seem to like birthdays less and less. That has a lot of significance, doesn't it? Because we hate time. We wish it wouldn't pass. People would often ask Peace Pilgrim how old she was, and she would never tell them. She wouldn't let them know that, because she wouldn't let herself know that. Said, I don't know anymore. I used to know, but then one day I realized it doesn't matter. So I stopped knowing. I'm living today. That's all I know. And of course, I'm not getting any younger, but if you've learned the lessons in each season of life, you have no desire to go back. It's only when you haven't learned those lessons that you wish time would stop passing. So for us, we come to the point when time stops being our enemy and it becomes our friend. This is the point that Shinzen makes. He says you come to the point with this practice that time is no longer the problem and it starts to be the solution. Because it's no longer that time is what's bringing the bad things to you and taking the good things away, such as your life. But time starts to be the way, the vehicle through which each next experience purifies your mind and makes it so that you can directly experience the fact that with absolute certainty, from now on, I will be happier than I have ever been before. From now on, that will be the way it is. And each next experience we have confirms that a small portion of the means by which we create suffering will be purified. this moment and this moment and this moment, and each next moment we directly taste the fact that each next moment purifies us of the causes of our suffering, so that we have the guarantee that, of course, there'll be ups and downs in terms of emotions and in terms of perceptions and in terms of relationships. All of that comes and goes because that's how time works. Everything continually changes. And yet the source of suffering and all that is being purified. So time becomes our most beloved, trustworthy friend. This is the opportunity that's given to us at a moment like this, at a time like this, when we have a shift, a transition into what we refer to as a new year. It's a chance for us to deeply contemplate, is that happening for us? Is that happening? Are we, with time, gradually getting closer to our own truth, which is something that is not up to us, something that isn't our opinion, is not our preference? Our opinions, our preferences, our assumptions, our patterns, none of that has any meaning here. This is our truth, which isn't up to us. Is each moment bringing us closer to that? It's something that we have to look at very closely. And at a moment like this, we should look at it in that very serious way. Because time is not compromising. Time doesn't have a nice conversation with us and make sure it's going to be okay. Yes? It's not like that. It's not like one of these movies where well, it's okay, it's from Hollywood, it's going to have a happy ending. Life doesn't actually work that way. And it's our job to adjust to the reality and to be willing to adjust our lives to the reality that is our true life. So let's make use of this time to deeply contemplate so that we can be sure that as we move through our days, we're not coming to regret. Turn those lights on. Pay attention to whatever you're intentionally doing right now. Since we're sitting still and not communicating, since we've set up this space in that way, so that we're not making very much use of our bodies, not making very much use of communication, of speech, since those have been dropped down to a minimal level, we're left with our thoughts, with the internal world of thoughts and emotions that we can intentionally produce. It's possible that we're thinking something on purpose or feeling something emotional on purpose. Pay attention to those things that you're intentionally doing. If you're not intentionally doing anything at a certain moment, then that's fine. You can just abide in that. But anytime that you notice you're intentionally doing something, attend to that. Observe yourself doing that thing. Observe your inner world of thoughts and emotions. Pay attention to anything that you're doing intentionally in that world. For example, if you're intentionally thinking about something, or if you're intentionally not thinking about something, if you're trying to figure something out, trying to stop yourself from thinking about something that you're trying to figure out. Attend to that intention, and without adding to it or subtracting from it, observe it. Observe that. If you find that you're not doing anything intentional, then that's fine. Just abide there. Experience that. Experience what it's like to not intentionally do anything. But if you are intentionally doing anything at all, with your body, with speech, with mind, observe that. And now add something more to this technique. Of course, this part of the technique will be somewhat intentional, as techniques are. But that's okay. You can loop the technique back on itself if you'd like. And that is, if you notice yourself doing something intentional, for example, thinking about something because you want to figure it out, or trying to stop thinking about something because you think that in meditation you shouldn't be thinking so much as you think, consider, is this beneficial? Is what I'm doing beneficial to myself or others? For example, if you're thinking about something that happened earlier today, you want to figure out what you should have done about it, consider, is it beneficial for me to be thinking about this? If it is, think about it. If you conclude that yes, it is, then think about it intentionally. If you conclude, no, it's not, it's detrimental. It's detrimental. It's not helping me, it's not helping others for me to think about this right now. In that case, with that knowledge, stop thinking about it. If you find that you keep on thinking about it, then simply go through the process again. And if you set it aside and you're not finding yourself doing anything intentional for a time, just abide in that. So once again, to review this technique, because it is a little bit complex, attend to whether you're doing anything intentional with body, speech, or mind. Of course, given our circumstances, most of what we're doing will be in our minds. You may find that you're doing something intentional, and you may not. If you find that you're doing something intentional, attend to that. If you find that you're not, attend to that. Abide in that. If you are, then as you attend to it, reflect. Is this intentional activity detrimental? Is it hurting anyone? Or is it beneficial? Is it helping anyone? If it's helping, or even if it's neutral, continue with that. But if it's detrimental to yourself or others, then do your best to stop that activity, to stop that doing, that intent within. Naturally, that brings up a new kind of doing, which is you're trying to stop doing, but you can turn the technique back on itself and ask, is it beneficial or is it detrimental for me to try to overcome this particular negative intention? And in that way, you can continue with the technique whatever happens. As we come to the end of this first half of silent practice, clearly delineate, clearly distinguish, clearly discriminate between actions that are detrimental and those that are not. If an action is detrimental, then try to stop doing it. If it's neutral or helpful, then enthusiastically continue. This is different from many ways of practicing in which we try to stop all thinking, and that's the kind of trying that is celebrated. In this case, if you find that you're thinking something beneficial, enthusiastically continue to think about that. If you're feeling something beneficial, enthusiastically continue to feel that. But if you find that something's detrimental to yourself or others, wholeheartedly strive to stop doing that, to stop intentionally maintaining that act. That's the goal. Regardless of what happens, strive. Try. Intend. Work. And rejoice in that positive activity.